welcome back. Hope you're doing well. As promised, in this lesson we'll build 2 more sections together that appear on the homepage of the site we're working on. These are the testimonials section and the newsletter section. You can download the files for this lesson from the video description. Let's open folder 10 in VS Code and the file index.html in Live Server. We'll start by creating the HTML structure for the testimonials section. Of course, we'll add a section tag with the class testimonials. Then, we'll add a div with the class testimonials wrapper, which will serve as the container where we'll add everything we need. Let's look at the reference to see where we begin. Naturally, we'll start with a title, and then we'll create the first slide, which we'll duplicate 3 more times. So, we'll add the title using an h2 tag with the classes mb30 and pad10. You already know where these classes come from and what they do, so I won't explain them again now. I'll add a title of 11 words with lorem 11, then press the Tab key. Now to create the slides, I'll make another container, a div, and assign it the class testimonial slide. Then, I'll insert an image of an example client, of course. As usual, I'll use the image tag and type in the path to the image, images/testimonials/customer-1.png. Next, I need to add a paragraph. It will contain 20 words enclosed in double quotes since it's a client's opinion, lorem 20. Somewhere in the middle of the paragraph, I'll add a BR tag to force the text onto a new line. At the end of the paragraph, just before the closing tag, I'll insert a span tag to wrap the client's name. We'll call them Customer1. Now, all I have left to do is copy the container with the class testimonial slide and paste it 3 more times. In total, there will be 4 clients. I'll update the client names and replace the images, and I'll do this a bit quicker. There's just one more thing to do before we can start styling this section. We need to create 2 arrows that the user can click to navigate through all the slides. To make this section function as shown in the reference, I've used a small piece of JavaScript code. This functionality could technically be done with just HTML and CSS, but the process would be more complicated, outdated, and require more CSS code. That's why I opted for JavaScript. I've added all the necessary explanations so you can understand what's happening, and you can read these explanations in the scripts.js file. Alright, let's create the 2 arrows. I'll use a button tag, which I'll add right after the title of the section, just above the first container with the class testimonial slide. This creates a clickable button on the web page. I'll attach 2 classes to the button, arrow and left, because this will be the left arrow. Then I'll add the onClick attribute with the value prefslide. This attribute specifies that when the button is clicked, a function called prefslide will be executed. To display the arrow itself, I'll use an HTML entity, ampersand, $10094, which represents a left-pointing angle quotation mark or arrow. And that's it. Now I'll copy this entire line and paste it below, right under the last div container with the class testimonial slide. I'll replace the left class with right, and I'll change the function pref slide to next slide. For the HTML entity representing the arrow, I'll replace the final digit 4 with 5. Now we're done. Let's move on to the CSS file to style this section. First, I'll add a comment, testimonials section, to indicate that everything below this point contains the styles for this section. We'll start with the section element, section.testimonials. I'll set a margin of 30 pixels at the top to push the section further down. Next, we'll work on styling the main container, .testimonials wrapper. This is the container that holds all the content for the testimonials section, such as the title, slides, and navigation arrows. Here's what we'll do. Position, relative, ensures that any absolutely positioned child elements within .testimonials wrapper are positioned relative to this container. Width, 90%, sets the width of the wrapper to 90% of the screen or parent container's width. Margin, 0, auto, centers the container horizontally on the page by setting the top and bottom margins to 0 and the left and right margins to auto. Overflow, hidden, hides any content that overflows the container's width, like slides going out of view. Text align, center, aligns all text inside the wrapper to the center. Padding, 30 pixels, 0, adds 30 pixels of padding to the top and bottom, creating space inside the container. Background color, number sign, FFF, sets the container's background color to white. Border radius, 10 pixels, rounds the corners of the container with a radius of 10 pixels, making it look softer. Alright, let's style the slides.testimonial slide. Display, none, hides the slide by default. Only one slide will be shown at a time. Padding, 0, 20 pixels, adds 20 pixels of space on the left and right of the slide, giving breathing room to its content. Next, we'll style the images. .testimonial slide, img. Width, 120 pixels. Sets the image width to 120 pixels. Height, 120 pixels. Sets the image height to 120 pixels, makes it square. Border radius, 50%. Turns the square image into a perfect circle by setting the border radius to 50%. Let's style the paragraph inside .testimonial slide. Margin top, 50 pixels. Adds a gap of 50 pixels between the top of the paragraph and the element above it, like the circular image. Now let's style the client names using the span element within .testimonials. Here's how we can enhance their appearance. Display, block, converts the span into a block element, making it take up the full width of its container, moves to a new line. Font weight, 700, makes the text inside the span bold. Now let's style the navigation arrows using the .arrow class. Position, absolute, positions the button relative to the nearest positioned ancestor, in this case, .testimonials wrapper. Top, 50%, vertically aligns the button to the middle of the container. Transform, translate Y minus 50%. Adjust the button's position slightly upward to perfectly center it vertically. Background color. Number sign, FFF, sets the button's background color to white. Font size, 40 pixels, sets the font size of the arrow symbol inside the button to 40 pixels. Border, none, removes any default border around the button. Padding, 0, 10 pixels, adds 10 pixels of padding to the left and right, giving the button more clickable space. Cursor, pointer, changes the cursor to a hand when hovered over the button. Opacity, 0.5, makes the button slightly transparent. Transition, opacity 0.3 seconds. Smoothly changes the opacity over 0.3 seconds when the button state changes. I'll now focus on styling the hover state of the arrows. Arrow, hover. Opacity, 1. Removes the transparency when the user hovers over the button. Finally, I'll slightly adjust the position of the arrows by using the two classes, left and right. Left, 50 pixels. Positions the left arrow button 50 pixels from the left edge of the container. Right, 50 pixels. So, all this CSS code creates a clean, centered testimonials carousel with navigation arrows that users can click to slide between testimonials. And that's it. Let's check if everything is working as it should or if there's anything to fix. There's nothing to fix. It's perfect as it is. Alright, now we can continue with the newsletter section. Let's go back to the index.html file to write the code for this section. Let's take a quick look at the reference to see what needs to be done. There are 2 lines of text and a very simple form. Nothing complicated here. We'll start, of course, with a section element to which we'll attach the class newsletter. The first line of text will be created with an h2 tag containing 4 words, lorem 4. The second line of text will use an h3 element containing 12 words, lorem 12. Now onto the form. We'll start with the form tag, and this time I'll attach an ID. ID equals news form to allow JavaScript to reference the form. The action attribute will remain empty for now. We'll return to it shortly, as we'll make the newsletter functional. I'll also add the method attribute with the value post. The method equals post attribute in an HTML form tag determines how data submitted through the form is sent to the server. Here's a detailed breakdown. The post method is used to send data to a server securely and is typically employed for actions that may modify server-side data, submitting a contact form, adding a new user, or uploading files. Unlike the GET method, which appends data to the URL, POST sends the data in the body of the HTTP request. This makes POST more suitable for sensitive or large amounts of data, as it doesn't expose it in the URL. Security. Since the data isn't visible in the URL, it's harder to intercept or manipulate during login forms. Data size. POST can handle large amounts of data, unlike the GET method, which has size limitations. Flexibility. the server can process and store the submitted data without relying on the URL structure. Let's move on and add the input elements we need. I'll start with a hidden input field. Type equals hidden. This specifies the type of input as hidden. Unlike visible input types like text or email, this field does not appear on the web page. It is used to pass additional information to the server without the user interacting with or seeing it. Name equals underscore subject. This gives the input field a name, which is key in form data. When the form is submitted, the server identifies this field by its name attribute underscore subject and retrieves its value. Value equals newsletter subscription. This sets the predefined value of the input field. In this case, the value newsletter subscription will be sent to the server when the form is submitted. If the server processes multiple types of forms, the underscore subject value newsletter subscription helps it differentiate that this is a newsletter form submission. It can also trigger specific actions on the server side, like sending an email with the subject newsletter subscription. We continue with two more input elements. Input type equals text. In this case, it is a single-line text input, meaning users can enter alphanumeric characters, letters, numbers, or symbols. Name equals name. The name attribute assigns an identifier to this input field. When the form is submitted, the value entered in this field is sent to the server with the label name. Placeholder equals your name. Provides a hint or instruction inside the input field, displayed in light gray text, default browser styling, when the field is empty. The placeholder disappears once the user starts typing in the field. Required. Makes the input field mandatory. If the user tries to submit the form without entering anything into this field, the browser will display a validation message. Please fill out this field. And then I'll copy this input field and modify it. This new input will be for the email address. Input type equals email. Name equals email. Placeholder equals your email address. Required. We just need a submit button with the text, subscribe, and that's it. Button, type equals submit. Type equals submit makes the button submit the form it belongs to when clicked. In this case, the form data, like name and email from the input fields, will be sent to the server specified in the form's action attribute. Without type equals submit, the button wouldn't trigger form submission automatically. We're ready to style the newsletter section. Let's head back to the CSS file and get to work, as we've got plenty to do. As usual, we'll start with a comment, newsletter section, and press Ctrl+/. We begin styling the newsletter container. Display Flex makes the container a flexbox, which allows for flexible alignment and layout of its child elements. Flex Direction column aligns child elements, like the form and headings, vertically in a column. Align items center horizontally centers the child elements within the container. Text Align center aligns text inside the container to the center. Background color $, FFF, sets a white background for the newsletter section. Padding 30 pixels adds 30 pixels of space inside the container on all sides. Box shadow 0, 0, 10 pixels, RGBA 0, 0, 0, 0.1. Adds a subtle shadow effect to give the container a slightly lifted appearance. Margin top 50 pixels. Creates a 50 pixel gap above the newsletter section. Let's move on to styling the H2 and H3 headings. .newsletter H2 and .newsletter H3. Margin top 15 pixels. Adds 15 pixels of space above the headings, separating them from content above. .newsletter H3. Margin bottom 10 pixels. Adds 10 pixels of space below the H3 heading, separating it from content below, like the form. Next, we'll focus on the input fields in the newsletter form. .newsletter input type equals email and .newsletter input type equals text. Width 40%. Sets the input field's width to 40% of their parent container's width. Padding 10 pixels. Adds space inside the input fields to make text entry more comfortable. Margin 10 pixels. Adds 10 pixels of space around the inputs, spacing them out evenly. Border 1 pixel, solid, number sign, CCC, adds a light gray border around the inputs. Border radius 5 pixels. Rounds the corners of the input fields slightly. The next step is styling the Submit button. Form button. Background color, number sign, 4B, 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 sets the button's background color to dark gray. Color, number sign, FFF, changes the button text color to white. Border, none. Padding, 10 pixels, 20 pixels. Adds space inside the button, 10 pixels vertically and 20 pixels horizontally. Border radius, 5 pixels. Gives the button rounded corners. Margin top, 10 pixels. Adds 10 pixels of space above the button, separating it from the inputs. Cursor, pointer. Transition, background color, 0.3 seconds. Creates a smooth color transition when the button's background changes on hover. Form button, hover, background color, number sign, 999. Changes the button's color to light gray when the user hovers over it. Now we just need to check how the newsletter behaves when resizing the browser window. Let's take a look and choose a breakpoint. I could leave things as they are, but I'd prefer the two input fields to stack vertically. So, I'll go with a classic breakpoint of 768 pixels. At media, max width, 768 pixels. First, I'll target the form element like this, .newsletter form. Display, flex. Flex direction, column. Ensures the form elements stack vertically on smaller screens. Align items, center. centers the form elements horizontally. Margin top, 20 pixels. Adds 20 pixels of space above the form on smaller screens. And then the two input fields. .newsletter, input, type equals email, and .newsletter, input, type equals text. Width, 100%. Makes the width of input fields to 60% of the container's width on smaller devices. We're almost done. The next step is to make the newsletter functional and ensuring that users know whether they've successfully subscribed or if there was an issue with the form. To achieve this, I've used a small JavaScript snippet, which I added to a separate file called newsletter.js, along with all the necessary explanations to help you understand how it works. Now let me explain exactly how I did it. I went to getform.io and created a user account. After creating and confirming your account with a valid email address, you'll receive a link like this. All you need to do is copy this link and paste it as the value for the action attribute in your form, just as shown in the reference image. You'll receive emails from your website's users at the email address you used to create your GetForm account. What is getform.io? Getform.io is a service that allows developers to manage form submissions on their websites without needing to write server-side code. It works as a backend for your HTML forms and handles collecting, processing, and forwarding the form data to you. What it does: Form backend, getform.io provides an endpoint where your form data is submitted, removing the need to create or manage a server for this purpose. Integrations. It integrates with various tools, such as Slack, Google Sheets, and MailChimp, to streamline workflows. Notifications. You can receive notifications via email or other integrations whenever someone submits a form. Custom responses. You can set up redirects to a thank you page or send autoresponses after form submissions. File uploads. It even supports uploading files via forms. I am not promoting this site or service. It doesn't belong to me, and I have no connection to it. You can find the same type of services at sites like formspree.io, typeform.com, and ninjaforms.com, so if you want to try it out, there are plenty of options. All right, let's continue. When a user subscribes to the newsletter, they'll receive a visual confirmation message from getform.io, a standard message, but not the one we want. So, we'll work on creating a custom message. Here's how I'll explain the process to you. First, I'll show you how everything works so you can better understand it. I'll go to the reference and subscribe to the newsletter. Initially, I'll alter the link provided by getform.io to make it invalid, and we'll see that the subscription fails and a failure message is shown. Then, I'll correct the link from getform.io to make it valid. You'll see the confirmation message change, and this time, the subscription will succeed. Next, I'll show you that I received the message both in my getform.io account and in Outlook on my computer. Finally, in this lesson, we'll create these custom messages ourselves. Let's add the two divs elements, one for the success message and one for the error message. This way, users will clearly know if their subscription was successful or if there was an issue. Div ID equals success popup. The ID attribute assigns a unique identifier to this div element. This ID is used in JavaScript or CSS to target this specific element. For instance, in JavaScript, it can be shown or hidden based on user actions. Class equals popup. You have successfully subscribed. BR tag, thank you. And the second one will be for the error message. Div ID equals error popup. Class equals popup and class error. Something went wrong. BR tagged. Please try again later. And that's it for the HTML part. We'll go back to the styles.css file to style the pop-up messages. I add a comment. Pop-up message, and we begin. First, we target the .popup class. Display none keeps the pop-up hidden by default. Position fixed fixes the pop-up's position relative to the viewport, so it stays visible even when the page scrolls. Top 50%, left 50%. Transform translate -50%, -50%. Centers the pop-up horizontally and vertically on the screen. Background color. Number sign 9ACD32 sets the background color to a vibrant greenish yellow. Color. Number sign 000. Font size 26 pixels. Text align, center. Padding 25 pixels. Add space inside the pop-up. Border radius 5 pixels. Width 60%. Limits the width of the pop-up to 60% of the screen. Box shadow 0, 0, 10 pixels. RGB A 0, 0, 0, 0.1. Adds a subtle shadow effect for depth. Z-index 1000. Places the pop-up above most other page elements. Then for the error message, I'll make the background yellow and the text red. .popup.error. Background color. Number sign FFFF00. Color. Number sign FF0000. And we'll make it responsive. I won't do much, just reduce the width to 90%. At media, max width, 768 pixels. .popup.error. Width, 90%. We've reached the end of today's lesson. Together, we've built two important sections and learned how to make them both functional and responsive. I hope this lesson was helpful and that you discovered new and interesting techniques. In the next lesson, we will build the footer, completing the first page of the website. Remember, progress is all about learning and experimenting, so keep exploring and pushing limits. I'm looking forward to having you in the next lesson. Great job, and see you next time.